Welcome, everyone. I am really excited for my guest today. Lauren Records is a recruiter and just an HR professional in general. And she's going to talk a little bit more about how recruiting is a piece of what she does. And she works for a manufacturing company, recruiting for all different types of levels. So I don't want to take up the introduction. I want her to talk about who she is and what she does. So Lauren, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in recruiting and talent acquisition, the organization you work for, and some of the positions that you recruit for as well?
Yes, absolutely. I was going to say you could do an awesome job introducing me, so you don't need me for this at all. But yes, I'm Lauren. I have been with my current position. I have to get out of that HR mind of saying institution, but my current company for almost a year now. So I started in February. And before that, I have been doing all of the recruiting and employer partnerships for a local university to Philadelphia. So I was doing all of the recruiting, all of the traveling, all of the planning for anybody to go anywhere. That all fell on me for graduate programs and adult undergraduate programs. So around 50 plus that I was the expert on. So I would go everywhere and I would do presentations on, why you should choose our school. So I became, a pseudo expert in a little bit of everything about those programs, which now thinking back to it, all that useless knowledge that I don't need anymore. But it really got me thinking that I loved the idea of recruiting and making those connections with people, and the amount of people that I met and kind of added into my network was amazing. And as someone who is definitely an introvert with like a hint of extrovert, if I need to be, recruiting seemed like something that I could, if not be super extroverted, at least fake the extroversion, to be like, okay, we can do this. I know what I'm talking about. I can be an expert if I need to. So from that, I had realized that I really wanted to dig deeper into human resources. So my graduate program was in higher education, and I kind of did that accidentally. I really wanted to do counseling, and my undergrad was in psychology. I meant to do counseling in grad school, but the program that I found was slightly shorter. So of course, I was like, let's do the easy way. So my program was higher education counseling and student affairs. So I had done an internship in admissions. Just because I needed an internship, I could have cared less what it was. Just to fulfill that requirement, I was like, just stick me in a university, I'll be fine. But I really liked the admissions side of it. So that's really how I got my job after graduation in admissions, and the recruitment piece of it. So a lot of people from my graduate program had kind of moved their way into either talent acquisition, recruiting, or human resources, because a lot of the skills that we learned in grad school and that we were doing in higher ed really translated itself well into human resources and that kind of people connection and recruitment piece. So I really was like, let me explore this. I was feeling kind of burnt out by higher ed, and instead of finding another piece of higher ed that I wanted, I was like, let me just explore this career altogether. Let's just jump off the deep end with out of life vets. Let's just do it. So I had contacted a few people that I knew in human resources. And, after talking to them and what they were doing, it kind of reaffirmed my wanting to switch. So I would say it was around Christmas last year that I really started looking for new opportunities, and mostly in higher ed. At that point, I was like, I have to get out of here, so I will go sling burgers if I need to. So luckily, I found like my dream job. But I, found this company through my previous role. Again, I was in charge of all of the corporate partnerships. So we had actually had a partnership with my current company. So I kind of reached out to my contact and I said, hey, like I need a job and I want to work with you. And it was mostly because they allowed dogs in the office, which I thought was
Nice.
like the coolest thing in the world. Huge. Always find a job where you can bring a dog into the office.
Yes. Yeah.
If
You'll
nothing else,
you'll
that should be it.
notice we have a little dog bed right here for those who are watching the video. This is for my dog Sierra, except she's not allowed in the room anymore because she's a mini schnauzer and she sits over there and digs every time I start talking. And I think it's her like anxiety of like, you're too loud, mommy. Like, what the heck? So she's exiled upstairs while we're doing interviews. But yes, I
Pro
respect
dogs.
the,
Yes.
yeah, pro dogs. Love it.
All companies. I'm going to do a petition now that all companies should have dogs. Just my own personal vendetta. But I knew that I would need to kind of start over in human resources because I'd made my way up to an assistant director in higher ed. And I knew that going into a new industry, while I did have some transferable skills, you know, I hadn't worked in HR. So I knew that I was going to have to start from the bottom, which I was totally fine with. And I thought the idea of this company was good from a standpoint of it's only about 150 employees. So I figured, you know, it doesn't seem as overwhelming. And with the breadth of activities that I did and what I would handle as an HR coordinator, you know, I was like, I feel like I could do this. So in addition to doing all of the recruiting, typically what we hire for all the time is our entry level positions. We do a lot of entry level assembly and manufacturing jobs that require just, you know, a pulse. You know, it's fine if you can come to work every day, you know, it's fine. And then we do mid-level jobs like customer service, tech support, things like that. And then we've done higher level searches, COO levels. We've had directors, things of that nature. Just so it's nice because I've gotten to do all of those searches. I'm really the main contact, and I'm the one who does about 95% of the work for those jobs. So it's really cool. It's exhausting. It's a lot of things to juggle at one time, but I feel like I've now, you know, almost a year and I've hit my stride of I know exactly what needs to be done for each job. So I really enjoy it. And as I was saying to Julia, you know, I really love the connection that I have with employees. You know, if nothing else, I want myself to be a good resource for them. You know, a lot of times at companies, you don't know who your HR person is, or, you know, it's just some person that hired you and then you never talk to them again. So my personal goal was to be someone that I could see them out on the floor, I could see them in the office, and, you know, they feel comfortable coming to me and using me as that resource, you know, for lack of a better word. So, besides the recruiting, I do all of the onboarding. I created a orientation program because there really wasn't anything. And I think orientation is such an important piece. And I've done terminations. Unfortunately, I still will never be excited about that. It's really uncomfortable.
I don't
But
think anybody is ever excited
no,
about terminations,
if you do,
regardless
maybe
of,
HR is not the role to be.
yeah.
But it happens. We've done raises, we've done performance reviews. I do company events. Currently, we're working on our holiday gift, which I'm so jazzed about. That kind of stuff I love, which is funny because I'm still an introvert. You know, I will live and breathe. I'm an introvert, but that's probably the general idea of what I do. But, you know, if you're looking to get into HR, starting with a small company, I would say is like the way to go.
Yes, sure. Yes. Thank you for sharing your story and your journey, because I think there are a lot of people that will resonate with a lot of the different parts of your journey, because you made an industry switch, you made a functional switch as well. You networked, you used people in the network that you already had.
Which is
You
not my
know,
thing.
I mean, like, you're literally doing all of the things that you should be doing when you're getting ready to do a switch like that. And given the time frame, I feel like you made that switch probably right ahead of when the bulk of the Great Resignation started. And for those who have been around, I've been talking about this for a long time, and I know it's going to be a theme throughout this season, talking with recruiters as well. But I would love to know, because you've been in this position through 2021, how has the Great Resignation impacted the recruiting cycle there? And like, what have you seen that's been a little bit different, or have you seen anything since, you know, it is a smaller, more localized company?
So if you had asked me this probably a month and a half ago, I would say, what Great Resignation? We have nothing about that. You know, we're totally fine. And then about 3 weeks to 4 weeks ago and current, we've had maybe 4 people put in their resignation for bigger and better opportunities. And while it's not a lot for a company that only has about 150 employees, It's a lot. And their reasons are varying. A lot of, I know there's so many jobs posted. I get alerts every day. There's lots to choose from right now. So I felt very confident of we're totally fine. There is no great resignation. We are immune from that. But, it's seeming now like it's going to continue. And maybe we just caught the tail end of that. But I know people feel more confident in their skills and that they'll
Mhm.
be able to find a job elsewhere. So maybe that's kind of empowering people to say, like, now's my time to make a move. I know I can get, X, Y, and Z job for better money or a better position. So I never blame people for that. I always say, every job is not going to be the best for everyone. Each company is not going to be the best for everyone. So, if, and I hope I'm not like biting my saying that, but I'm always in favor of people, regardless, not my company, just in life, going
Mhm.
for positions that you want. If you're not happy, as someone who was very unhappy in their last position, just go
Mhm.
for it. Just, doesn't
Right.
hurt to like just try, just
Well,
apply.
and there's opportunity right now. I think that's what we're seeing, and at the time of this recording, we're in the end of November because this isn't going live until beginning of 2022. But, right now, I honestly feel like you are kind of in the height of it right now. I think a couple months ago when we started, like I did a podcast episode on it and we were really starting to hear it, it wasn't quite on everybody's radar. And I think in the last month or so, like October, November, I'm starting to hear a lot more noise about it.
Hmm.
And for some people, yeah, they're leaving because it's not a good fit and therethere's opportunity. For other people, I think it's just, you know what? I can just do something different, or I can change my scenery up. I don't think it's all for negative.
100%.
And I think that's the thing to remember too. Like it might not have anything to do with your company and everything to do with like they just want something different and they
Yeah.
know that's not available, right?
Right.
Like because it is a small company. So opportunities are going to look a little bit different
Right.
there.
And I think it's really, it's not our parents and grandparents generation of people staying at jobs for 30, 40 years. It's very common for people to move around, and that's a lot of times how people get better titles and get bigger salaries and things and get benefits. It's by moving around and utilizing the skills that you have and taking it somewhere else. And I really feel like I'm jinxing myself, but I'm hoping it's not. But it's really, it's, and like you said, if you're looking for another just completely different change, this is probably a time to be like, hey,
Yeah.
there's just so many jobs in X, Y, and Z. Let's just try it out. So I hope no
Yeah.
one from my company hears that. I don't want anyone to leave, but I'm always a pro. You find what fits best for you, and
Yeah.
that's where you have to be selfish sometimes.
Right, right. Okay, let's talk about your normal hiring cycle though. Like, I know you talked about you recruit for a lot of different positions, so maybe there isn't a general hiring cycle, but do you have kind of a hiring cycle that you go through where there's times of the year that are a little bit more heightened and not, or like what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think the structure of it all is the same in terms of coming up with the job description, figuring out what the salary is for it, figuring out who the hiring manager is going to be, who am I going to pass, applications to. All of that is really similar. The timing of it depends on the hiring manager. If you're super quick, we can get it done quickly, get it posted, figure out what the budget is for it. If we take a little bit longer, it just kind of spreads itself out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Having been there almost a year, I don't know if there is a time in the year that's busier than others. Like I said, we constantly have the job position open for our assemblers
Mm-hmm.
because we constantly need people. And again, it's entry level, so it's not a super. It is probably a high turnover job, like I'm sure every entry level job is. So
But that type of job, you kind of expect that it's going
absolutely,
to be like
absolutely,
that. And yeah, like you kind of know going in that it's
yeah.
it's a
And
stepping
it's
stone.
exactly, especially for people, we don't do background checks, and it's for good for people who are looking to kind of slow down, if they want like something part-time, if they're retired, things like that, or if you're fresh out of high school and you need a first job. It's a good stepping stone job. So that one's always open. The other ones have been just when the need is.
Mm-hmm.
And we're growing a lot. My position itself, I didn't replace anybody. They created a second HR position because the company had grown doubled in size in the last couple years. We went from about 60 employees and now we're hovering about 150. So it's a good time to be at our company because we are growing. We're really not, besides in the last couple of weeks, we really haven't been replacing people. It's been adding positions. Say engineering needs an extra person, product management needs an extra person, manufacturing needs an extra person. So it's been I know our director does a lot of the strategy piece of next year, what have we budgeted for? What positions will we need? And I'm not privy to that information. I just see it come across my desk of like, time to post. So I do all of the work for it. So I do, like I said, getting all the position ready to post. We post on Indeed, and sometimes we'll share, if it's a higher level job, we'll post it on LinkedIn. If it's an entry level, we don't usually bother with that. And then obviously I know when you post it on Indeed or your own website, it gets picked up by, other servers and things like that. So all of that is pretty similar to every job. In terms of the resume review, I still do all of that. And then I either, with the entry level jobs, I will do those myself, do the interviewing and things like that. With the mid to senior level jobs, I have the hiring manager screen them. And then we either do a round of, because it's COVID, we're doing a lot of video interviews. And then if you get to more of a final round, we'll bring you in person and show you around the facility, and you'll meet with other members of the team as well. So awesome. It depends on the job typically. And it, again, depends on the hiring manager, how quickly we can get these jobs done. Yeah. I had one that lasted from April to October because we had offered it to 2 people and failed the search twice.
Oh no.
That was definitely a punch in the gut. And now having done it a couple times, I know that's what comes with being a recruiter in the territory. But still like, why don't you want to have this job? Definitely took it personal the first time. But after that, I was like, it's okay. Again, not every job is for everybody. So
right.
It just depends. It depends. But the structure itself remains the same. And I've really gotten into a rhythm of reviewing and spending X amount of time, each day on each job. So some days are busier than others, depending on how many jobs are open.
Right. Awesome. Okay. So you talked about posting on Indeed and LinkedIn, depending on what the position is. Do you guys actually use an ATS system or an application tracking system at your company?
Yeah. So we use Paylocity, which I think is super intuitive, at least from the back end. But as someone who did apply to the company via Paylocity, I can confirm it's pretty simple to do from the front end too. It comes in, they can either apply from the website or usually Indeed. And if they apply via Indeed, I'll move them over to Paylocity. Okay. We have email templates that are pre-populated about taking a behavioral assessment or coming in for interviews and things like that. So it's really easy to keep track of it there. And something that I do like about Paylocity, and again, this is my first real HR job, so I haven't used any other ATS systems, at least from the back end. So it's nice because it doesn't make you put in all of your information ad nauseum. I've heard that people are putting in their resume and it doesn't automatically populate, so then they go over and over, and that definitely deters people from applying. Myself included, to jobs. So I think it's nice because you can put in all that information again, but you can just as easily skip it and have it pre-populate from your resume, or skip it altogether and just have the recruiter look at your resume. So it's nice because it makes it easy for people to apply.
That's great. That's great.
What I use, and I really like it.
Yes, I have heard that from so many job seekers. It's like, why do I have to enter everything multiple times? Like, what's the point?
It's not worth it. And as someone who did this last year, I will definitely skip it. There's so many, especially now, like there's so many jobs that if you get frustrated, I've been there where you're just like, never mind, I'll pick a different one.
Yeah. And what is your system looking for? Like, are you guys setting what the system is? Like, how does that work? Because I know people think that an ATS system is basically like a black hole and it doesn't get anywhere. So what does that look like for you guys? Are you looking at every resume? Does it weed people out? Like, what's going on the back end there?
Yeah, so because we never have too many jobs open at a time, and because we're a smaller company, I have the time to go through each person's resume. So I do understand the black hole, it is a real thing. But with smaller companies, I'm going to make the assumption that it doesn't happen as much with getting your
Mm-hmm.
resume lost. Um, for us, it's not necessarily specific keywords or things like that. When I'm looking over a resume, I just look to see, what are the job headings and then what are some of the duties that you've done. Typically, I'll skip over the ones that aren't as relevant. So if you're applying to a customer service job and you have some service industry ones or things like Burger King or things like that, I'll probably skip that. Just because I'm really looking to see, even if it wasn't your most recent job, but do you have, certain things that we're looking for?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have something that scans it out because we don't have that many coming through, especially for our mid to senior level jobs. I do take the time to go through them. And I make it a point to, if we're not going to move forward, to send them a rejection, because I know what it's like to have your application just sit somewhere for 45 years and never hear anything back. It's really frustrating. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
as much as it's not my favorite thing to reject people, but
Right.
I'd rather you at least know than always wonder, what happened to that job that you applied for.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's good to hear because I had another interview where they are also at a smaller company and it was kind of similar. It was we look at everything that comes through. I have that relationship with people, I contact them, all of that. And I think for those listening, you're hearing different things depending on what the recruiter is recruiting for and the type of organization. And so, if you're applying to the Googles and the Facebooks and the Apples, that's really high volume. And so if you start to look at the smaller companies, they're not usually as high volume, especially local companies, right, where the work is local and everything's local. It's going to look a lot different. And so that's something that you want to think about in your strategy when you're applying,
Yes.
and what you're looking for. So I really appreciate seeing this perspective because I think sometimes people forget there are companies in your local area that are also hiring probably for similar positions that you're looking for at some of these really high volume tech companies. So
Yeah. Yeah,
thank
and
you
I'm
for
sure they go
sharing
through,
that.
I think they go through a lot more than I do on a daily basis. So I could see that. But I think, it's for things like that, it's always good if you know somebody or you have some
Hmm.
sort of in, because like you said, more often than not, your resume is probably going to end up in that black hole. So
Right, right,
it's nothing personal. It's just the fact that there's
right.
so many of them that
Yeah.
how would anyone get through all that?
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about resumes.
Segue.
Yes, such a good segue. What are like your top three resume tips for applicants based on what you've seen?
Okay, so I have my notes. So if I look over, I'm not ignoring you. So my first one is, don't make it super complicated. I've seen a lot where people try to add more than they need to, or add like graphics, or sometimes people will put like certain words on there of like, these are my hobbies, and like, yes, while those are good to know about you as a person, when I'm scanning your resume, it doesn't interest me that you kayak or go hiking, things like that. And I'm sorry for everyone who does that, but it's important, I think, and for me, it's different because I do look at all of them, but I really want to know in a very organized fashion, because I'm super type A, just have your job and your company and your dates worked, and put things like that you can quantify. So if you worked on
Hmm.
some project and like this was the outcome, or if you saved the company X amount of dollars doing something, or if you planned an event for X amount, things like that. Um, it's always good to see quantifiable things. Um, but also, I know people say that it's good to put certain keywords in from the job posting, but
Hmm.
only do this if it's relevant. So please don't just go through the job description and say like, well, they want this, so like, let me add this to what I did. We can tell, and there's things that don't really match up. I like to use Burger King, and this has nothing to do with Burger King, but if you're putting things that are like way out of the scope of what you'd be doing at Burger King, I would hope that people in my position would be able to catch that.
Yeah.
So my thing is just do less. But in terms of, just put things that are very, very simple and easy to glance over. The paragraphs to me are just like exhausting. Putting quick bullets of things are useful, and you don't need 1,000 bullets, maybe like 3 or 4, maybe 5, per job. Um, I just haven't seen where, sometimes your ATS system can't pick it up. Um, so we've had ones where I'm trying to move things over from Indeed to Paylocity, and because there's graphics or weird fonts or things are in a strange order, it
Hmm.
it gives it an error. So for me, I'm like, oh, well, now I have to download it in another form and move it over. So I'll still do it, but it's exhausting. So
Right.
I mean, and Word and a ton of places have so many templates. Just don't make it harder than it has to be in terms of making your
Hmm.
resume, and always be okay with tweaking things and editing things and updating it constantly. It only helps you to know what's on your resume, so that if you do get an interview, you're not they ask you a question about it and you're like, oh yeah, I don't remember that, or I definitely totally made that up. So
Yeah.
it's good to also be, versed in your resume. So that was long-winded. I'm sorry. But
No, no, that was perfect because I know I don't edit a lot of resumes anymore because I do more like who are you, what are you doing with your life type things. But back in the day when I was literally editing resumes every single day, um, I could tell who was using a template. And usually I would tell them immediately, I'm like, take it all, take it away. Like, you can't, don't even use a template. Get in Word, basic, line, return, return, return.
yes,
Don't use boxes. Don't try to get fancy. Don't
no,
use Canva. Do not use Canva. Like,
love
I mean, I love Canva.
not
Don't
for
get me
that,
wrong.
not for that.
Not for the Word, Google Docs, that's fine. But like keep it so simple because and this is the reason why. Like she is literally telling
Retweet.
you some of these systems can't read these really like fancy formats. If you get an interview and you want to send over like a really pretty version, cool, do that. But like for these application systems, like you have to keep it almost like simple and boring is
Yes,
usually like
yes. If it's easy to read and all you have is, some bullet points, I'm totally fine with that. If you have
yeah,
extra boxes and blurbs and text, and I'm like, I'm not going to read that. And I
right.
found it with people who have less experience, try to add a bunch of things to make it a full page. And while I understand the reasoning for that, look, if you've done one job and these have been your duties, there you go, you're done. You
Right.
don't need to add extra things on there to just to have it.
Right.
Just make it simple, but be able to know what's on there instead of adding things just to add things. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's true they won't pick up on it. It's hard.
Yeah. So for those that are struggling with writing bullet points, especially those that maybe are a little bit more entry level or who haven't written a resume or revised it in a long time, I actually have a resource on my website called the Ultimate Resume Tip. And it is literally a step-by-step how to write bullet points, exactly what she's talking about, because I worked with recruiters for many, many years. And this is exactly what the for. This is a free resource on my website. I'll put the link in the page, the web page for this episode that you so that you can have that. But that's a really great starting point for those of you who maybe aren't quite talking about when she's saying like put results in it, all of that. I also have to make another comment about like the hobbies thing. Okay, so I never tell people to put hobbies. The only exception to that is if people are like competing doing something. So like if you're an ultra marathoner or you've been an Olympian, I know there's not that many, but a lot of people do Olympic trials and things like that. If you're competing in some way, those types of things are actually can be very relevant depending on the type of position that you're applying for. And so when I worked with college students, if they were an athlete, that was one of the things that I had them put on there, especially if they held some type of position within their team or they won something or whatever, because there's a lot of skill that comes with being an athlete or competing. Like there's a lot of like intention and all of that. So, if you just hike for funsies, then no, don't put that on your resume. But if you actually, it's something that you train for and you do and you compete and all of that, it might be something to consider depending on the types of positions you're applying for.
100%. Yeah. And there's a lot of, our company manufactures equipment for rowers. So if people know that ahead of time and they put that they were a collegiate rower, things like that, I totally agree with Julia. That's definitely a really important thing to know, and to put on there, because it really connects you with the company. And you can say, oh, well, this person might know our products or know what we do. So it's always a good thing, to
Yes.
do that research ahead of time, for
Yes,
sure.
yes. Okay, other resume tips that you
Yes.
have.
So we kind of talked about this earlier, but if you are applying to a job where you either like don't have experience with, or it's like a new company, or you're switching, I always suggest to either include a tiny blurb on the top, of your resume, or attach a cover letter, just kind of explaining why you want to switch or why you're interested in this. So, for example, we've had some people who would apply to something like tech support. Um, but maybe that's not a good example. Let's use me, for example. Let's use me. So someone who's applying to an HR position, yes, I have recruitment experience, but on my resume, if you look at it, if you're just scanning the job titles, you would be like, no, you don't, you haven't worked in HR before, you don't know.
Mhm.
So it's good to explain, not only change, edit the things that you've had, on your skills or what you've accomplished for that. So for me, I would put that I, did this full cycle of recruiting. I was in charge of this. I made the partnerships, things like that. But if you're looking for a job that's outside of your normal scope or your career, I always think it's important to say why you're interested in that. The same way that I would say if you're applying to a job across the country, and say you're in Louisiana and you're applying to a job in Philadelphia. Some people, myself included, if there's nothing on there about wanting to relocate or a reason that you're already going to be in that area, I'm going to think you might have done that by mistake and just kind
Mm,
of screen out that resume, because I'm thinking, well, if it's an in-person job in Philadelphia and you live in
right.
Louisiana, that commute seems a little
Yeah.
not workable. So it's always good if it's something that's not an obvious job that you're applying for, something that you've already done. It's always good to kind of include that, like, hey, I didn't do this by mistake, or this is the reason I want to switch careers, things like that.
Right, right.
So that's
Oh,
my
I
other
love that.
second one.
Something else too, because you came from admissions in higher education into human resources recruiting. So admissions is a very higher education title and term that is not going to translate into other industries. And so and I'd love to know your thoughts on this, because I've advised clients on this in the past. So what I'll tell them to do is put, either way, either put like the more industry appropriate title and then put their actual title in their current industry in parentheses, or flip-flopped. It just doesn't really matter. But basically having two versions of that, so that the person scanning it, if they're not familiar with higher education, they don't know what admissions is, they can look and be like, oh, okay, they were a recruitment coordinator or recruitment counselor versus an admissions counselor, which might not translate, which I also recommend for LinkedIn as well, because again, that language is so specific. Is that something that you would be okay with seeing on a resume?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I definitely did that when I was applying for jobs, because, like you said, a lot of higher ed terms and things like that are not transferable into the corporate world, or anything else. So, it's important to not only put, what you've done, just if it's not HR. I'm sorry, if it's not higher education, put, what that would mean in any other world. But doing something like putting in parentheses, like for me, looking at a resume of someone who's applying to one job but has been in a completely different career, it definitely helps to say, oh, that's what that is. To me, it doesn't seem like you're trying to forge something, or you're just deciding you have a new title when you don't. It's not a bad thing. So I definitely would recommend that, regardless of industry. If it's something that doesn't translate into any other industry, finding those terms and things that would kind of coordinate with it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Great. Any other resume tips? I feel like we have two. Did you have another one?
Yeah, I have. Of course I do. I follow instructions.
Yes.
No, my last one's kind of short. So my third recommendation for this is your resume, but also as this is kind of more of an application thing. If the salary for a job is not listed, which that's a whole nother story. But do your research on what your salary requirements might be. If they're not asking for it and it's not listed, you can either like contact your recruiter or ask it in your interview. But if they do, so for example, for some of our jobs, we have what are your salary requirements? So my suggestion is to always look up on Glassdoor or on salaries, look up what an average person in this role would be making so that you're not either underselling yourself or way overshooting. If it's a job that's probably more in the $30,000 range, but you put your requirements are 115,000, I'm not going to look at your resume. And that's nothing. It's just for me having that conversation of like, we're not even going to be close to being able to meet in the middle for
Right,
that.
right.
You know, it's always good to do that. And I think as a personal thing, if it asks what your salary recommendations are and you feel comfortable doing that research and putting it in there, like for me, looking at jobs for our company, it's very helpful to see what people's salary requirements are because some of them are not always listed on our jobs because we have a budget for it and we want to see what people's experience is before we give them a hard number.
Mhm.
Um, but don't just decide. That's to sum it up. Don't just decide what you want to be making and throw it in there because a lot of times that's a very quick way to get your application just like thrown in that dark hole. So
Oh
that's
my
my last
gosh. Okay, such good advice. And I will say real quick, Glassdoor, salary.com, LinkedIn also has salary information. Check out professional associations for whatever you're going into, whatever field you're in. They usually have salary data, and then payscale.com. Those are all the places that I tell clients to do their research honestly, before you even start the application process.
if it's
So
worth your
that,
time, do
yeah,
that
it's
research.
worth your time to do because you need to understand with your experience and the industry where you're going to fall, especially if you're making an industry switch. Because a lot of times it's not the same.
No, and I was
So,
definitely very guilty of that. I looked up what the average person in my role would be making, and I was like, it's less than what I'm making, but I really want to switch, and I feel like this would be a really good spot to stand, and I know that I would be taking a slight pay cut. And I actually ended up, because of my experience, not taking a pay cut. So, but it's always good to have done that research and at least know
yes.
so that you're not disappointed, you're not wasting your own time, you're not wasting their time. So if it's asked, if it's not, do your research just to know for yourself. So when they say, like, what are you looking to make? Or when you ask them what the salary is for the job, but it's always good to do that research so that you know ahead of time so
Right.
there's no surprises and you're not wasting your time.
Right, right. And I always tell clients too, you want to have three numbers with you. You want to have the like lowest number you're willing to take, or the lowest number that you're willing to switch jobs for, and you can still live and and be and all of that. You want to have like the average number based on the research that you've done and all of that, what you think is probably average, and then you want to have that like higher end number if you have the ability to negotiate and all of that. What is like, but it's probably a little bit on the high end based on the research that I've done. Because even if you put that middle number on the salary line, you can still negotiate if you get the offer depending on the company and whether or not they even negotiate, because some companies don't.
Mhm.
But you have that option as well. So don't think that just because you put that number down, you're like stuck with that. You're not.
Yep,
Yeah.
totally agree.
Awesome. Okay, let's jump into interviews because I know that's a part of what you do as well. So, what are some of your interview tips, especially now that a lot of stuff is virtual? What are you seeing? What do you want to tell people they should be doing?
Oh my goodness. So some of our jobs, I would say probably 70% of them are going to be a majority virtual interviews, but the ones for our entry level positions, they're coming into the office. They don't do anything virtual in terms of interview because they're on site every day. There's no hybrid or work from home option for them. So as kind of really ridiculous as it sounds, show up to your interview. The amount of times, and I don't know if it's 2020, 2021 related, why people think, oh, I can get a job anywhere, but the amount of times that people have just no call, no show, for interviews is insane to me. And I just, having not been in HR, I was not prepared for all the work that I've done for an interview for them to not show up. And then I second guess myself, like, did I not send it? Do I have amnesia? Did we not talk about this? So besides showing up, obviously, on a serious, be 10 to 15 minutes early. If you show up super early, I always think that's kind of inconvenient for the people interviewing you, because then they either have to make you wait or they have to kind of rearrange their schedule a little bit to take you early. But 10 to 15 minutes is, good. And these are probably things that you're getting for everybody else, but to be reaffirmed, this is what you should do. I think unless you know what the dress code is for an interview, always just dress nicely. That doesn't necessarily need to be a suit and tie if it doesn't need to be. But unless you ask ahead of time, which is always a good question to ask just in general, like what's the attire that's appropriate for this interview? It's not a weird question. It's always like, hey, well, let me tell you, this person wants to be prepared. And thank you emails never go unnoticed. So that was my one interview tip, but it's all rolled into, but just like simple, basic things that you can do without thinking about how you'll actually be in the interview, of just your presence, just coming in on time, coming in a little more professional, unless like some of ours, we tell you, like, you can wear jeans. You're totally fine wearing jeans to this. We're very casual, but unless they say that, don't show up in sweatpants. It's never a good idea.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm actually surprised that people aren't showing up to interviews.
Me too.
Like, honestly, after 2020 and people being laid off and all of that, it really kind of blows my mind that is an issue. Do you happening like mostly for your like entry level positions, or is it happening across the board?
So it's a majority, I would say 95%. It's the entry level, and I have to chalk that up to, it's entry level, you can get a job anywhere type of thing. It's definitely less professional. I haven't seen it much with others, but I will say for the virtual interviews, we have had people in mid roles that are not showing up for virtual, whether it's on Teams or Zoom. Sometimes people will reach out and say they missed it, and other times I'm like, what happened? I know I sent it, and I look back to make sure I sent it. So if it's a situation with not understanding the platform that your interview is on, just do a test run. Just you don't necessarily have to download new applications, but if you're only familiar with Zoom, but the interview's on Teams, just check it out, just look at it, just so that you're prepared to hop on it. Is the thing. But we've definitely had people who have not shown up for virtual interviews for mid-level jobs that I'm shocked.
Wow.
And sometimes I don't hear from them at all. And sometimes when I do, people are like, oh, I thought it was this day, or something came up. And things come up if you have an emergency or things like that, almost always we will work with you to reschedule it. But if we don't hear from you for a little while, or we don't hear from you at all, then, we're just moving on.
Yeah. Oh, so interesting.
It's very, it really makes me think that I'm not doing my job well, or I didn't do it at all. I'm like, oh my gosh, should I even send this to them? Are they just, out in cyberspace?
Well, and it's time. It's time. It takes away time from you. It takes away time from the hiring manager, like it's really inconvenient. And I know there are thoughts out there of like, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It does matter. Like you're still at the end of the day, if you've made it to an interview stage, that's another human across from you, so anytime that you miss, obviously barring any, extraneous circumstances, like that is somebody's time that they have set aside for you. And if you made it to the interview stage,
we like you.
You're qualified. They like you. Like go through with it.
And
you
if
just
it's a situation where something comes up in advance, if you just send a quick email, if this is for an in-person interview or a virtual interview, just say you're not going to make it. If you need to if you need to say, can I get back with you to reschedule or something like that, if you just let us know, That way, like Julia said, we're not wasting our time. We're not sitting there for half an hour, waiting for people and then having to go back to the drawing board if we're close to the
Right.
end,
Right.
So if you know that you're not going to make it, or if something comes up, say something right away. I guarantee they'll work with you. And if it's something where you missed it or you have an emergency, send an email right away, call them and just say, I'm so sorry. Can we reschedule? It's
Yeah.
more communication is better communication. I wish I could print that out and put it somewhere, which I probably can, but it's always better. You're not going to bother people by just being communicative and just letting people know what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. Okay, you mentioned cover letters a little earlier, and my big question is, do we care about cover letters anymore? Because there's a lot of debate out there. Some people love them, some people like don't ever want to look at them again. Where is your company on cover letters?
So it depends on the job. For entry to mid-level jobs, I would say don't worry about it. It's always nice to see, but in all honesty, having been someone who's written cover letters, it's so tedious, it's obnoxious. You always doubt yourself of, am I putting too much? Am I putting not enough? Am I tailoring this properly to the company and the job? So if it doesn't require it and you are not switching careers or going into a new industry, I would say don't do it. Don't hold me to that. It could be different. But in my personal opinion, if it's not a senior level job or it doesn't ask for one, we typically only ask for them if it's a higher level job. If you're going to be, the C suite or some sort of manager, we might ask for one. But if you're not asking for one and it's not a career change,
Mhm.
no. If it's a
Okay.
career change and you say like, you want to explain why you're switching careers or why you're interested. Other than that, no,
Okay.
my personal opinion,
Great.
and I hated writing them, so I'm happy to report that.
No, and I think that's great. You had mentioned earlier about the career switch and writing a cover letter. I think that's really great, especially if you do have some experience. You don't want to take up that space on your resume, and so just adding that extra cover letter in the case of your company, I think is a really great idea. But honestly, I mean, thinking about this for other companies where maybe the cover letter is optional, if you are making that switch, yeah, what a great way for you to explain what's going on, why you're making the switch, and some of those, really good transfer to the new space. So I
Absolutely,
really love that advice.
absolutely.
All right, what do you think job seekers like should be doing, but they aren't doing right now?
So, I think the biggest thing that I'm not seeing that I'm shocked at, because it's just something I always did, was follow up. So, not
Mm,
even after just an interview, but if you apply for a job that you're really interested in, it does not hurt to either email the recruiter, email, even if it's the general email box, find them on LinkedIn, call them, it doesn't hurt to follow up. So, the reason I say that is because if you're applying to a bunch of jobs and it's not a huge deal, then don't bother. If you get a call for an interview, awesome. But if it's something that you're really interested in, follow up. And a lot of times for me, having going through resumes all day long, sometimes people fall to the bottom of my pile. They might get
mm,
lost, and it's no fault of your own. But during either busy seasons or if we have several jobs going on, there's lots of applicants. Um, Sometimes people get lost in the weeds, and it's not anyone's fault. It just happens. So following up and just saying, hey, what's the status of this? I'm super interested. And you can literally copy and paste that and send it to all these jobs. It doesn't need to be tailored. It doesn't need to be another cover letter, anything like that. It just something to show that you're really interested. So
yeah.
I think that's something that I always, always did when applying for jobs. And now I feel like I've maybe gotten to. And that's just from the application part. Following up after interviews, I think is really important. Um,
Sure.
Again, you don't need to, if you're on a Zoom interview with four people, you don't need to then send it to all four people. You can if you want to go above and beyond. But if you just send it back to the recruiter and say, like, thanks for interviewing me, really excited about the company, yada yada. It can be as simple as that. I'm sure other people have different opinions on that, but I think, especially for the application piece of it, if you want a job and you haven't heard from the recruiter, um, I'd probably give it like 2 weeks just to be safe. But if you're
Yeah.
interested, let them know you're interested.
Yeah, I think that's great, especially for smaller companies
Mhm.
where the volume is a lot different. And I know there are some applications where they will say, please do not email, please do not
Yes.
contact
And then
us.
don't. And then do not say
Then
that Lauren
don't.
told you to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of like follow the directions type of thing. But if they don't put that, then and they are a smaller company, a local company, I think this is great, such great advice for people to remember depending on their situation and where
Yeah, I
they're
think the only
applying.
other thing that I would suggest that people, and this is not all people, but being authentic in your interview. I know that it sounds super cliche, that should probably be on a t-shirt, but it's something that interviews are so uncomfortable. Applying for jobs sucks. It's not fun. If you're in a bad situation and you need to get out, it's even more stressful. It's not going to be a fun process regardless of when you do it or how often you do it. So taking that into account and realizing, it's going to be okay. Like the right job is going to find you. And once you do get to that interview process with jobs, be yourself. It's nerve wracking. You're going to be nervous. You're uncomfortable. You're basically selling yourself to these people that don't know anything about you. So just be confident in your skills. You obviously, like Julia said, you got to this point, so we already like you. So we're just seeing, how will you fit with our team? So ask questions about that, ask questions that you want to know about. We're interviewing you, but you also need to want to work here, So it's important to take a deep breath and just let us get to know you. And if that's things like, sharing like, oh, I like to hike. Those are the times where you should say, like, here's
Yes.
some of my interests, here's what I like to do, here's who I am as a person. Anything that helps us understand who you are and how you'll fit into our team, those people, leave the biggest impressions, on your interview. So just be yourself, try to absorb those nerves, try to get yourself prepared, try to just be, find things with the people that you're interviewing with that you can kind of relate to. Um, and just be comfortable. It's uncomfortable, it's never going to not be uncomfortable, but people who are confident in their skills and what they bring to the table always go farther, always.
Yes. Oh, I love hearing that. Such great advice. Lauren, this has been so wonderful. There have been so many tips and pieces of advice that you've given the audience. I'm so excited to be able to share this when it goes live. Do you have any last thoughts or tips for everybody? Anything we didn't talk about that you feel like you just have to share?
So I think I kind of already talked about that, but you know don't give up on this process. It's not comfortable, you don't like it, nobody likes it, but the right job is going to find you. You're going to apply for way more jobs than you're ever going to hold in your lifetime. So be confident in what you have and realize that, it's going to find itself. It's going to work itself out. And the biggest thing that I didn't take advantage of when I was applying to jobs in college, after college, in grad school, out of grad school, was using my network. And I know that, your college and your professionals that are around you will use that word ad nauseum. And it doesn't necessarily need to be your college career center. It can be neighbors, it can be friends of
Mhm.
people that you know. So many of the jobs that we have or the positions that people have come have been referrals. If you like your job, you're most likely going to tell other people about it, and then they might keep their eye out on that company or that type of job, things like that. So it's always good to use not just your I mean, obviously use your alumni network, use your college counseling center, your career counseling, things like that, but use people that you know. You might not know that, someone that works with like your aunt is either in the field you want to be in or know someone at a certain company. Put it out there. It's not embarrassing
Mhm.
if you're job searching. Put it out there that you're looking for something new or you're looking for a specific job at a specific company. Use the people that are around you. A lot of people, know a lot more than you think they do and have connections. So, you know, it's always good to say like, oh, I know so and so does so and so. So it's really good to use your network, use LinkedIn. I think when I was job searching this time last year, I had not used LinkedIn. And that's embarrassing as someone who did that. But I was like, I don't need that. It's another thing to keep up with, but it's really important and you can find a lot of jobs on there. So
Yes.
and a lot of jobs that people will respond to you with, because you're a lot of times it's going through a real recruiter, things like that. So
Hmm.
it's another way to just kind of put yourself out there, introduce yourself, and make connections. So I think a lot of people, networking goes in one ear and out the other, but
Hmm.
you can use people that and doesn't have to be such an unnatural process, because job hunting is unnatural. Nobody likes it. It's
So true.
uncomfortable. It's not fun, but once you get that job that you feel like you're like, okay, I'm here. And it doesn't need to be your forever job, but you'll know it when you feel like you're in a job where you feel valued and you feel like what you bring to the table is important. You'll know
Yes.
when you find it.
Yes, Lauren. Ah, that was a perfect ending for this interview.
That wasn't even planned.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. This was so great. And I know the audience is
Absolutely.
going to get a lot out of it. I have to make another shameless plug for myself. But if you're trying to figure out LinkedIn and you want to understand how to network with people, especially if you tend to be more introverted and you want to be more intentional, check out my LinkedIn Level Up for the Corporate Professional course. It takes you through LinkedIn A to Z, how to write your profile, how to connect with people, and how to become a thought leader so that you those inbound connections and get noticed by recruiters. So I will leave a link for that also in the notes for this episode. But Lauren, thank you again so much for being here. I
Of
really
course.
value your opinion and just being able to share with our audience.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This was a blast.